Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to Wisdom from North. Today, you're going to hear quite the extraordinary story. My guest on the show is Elisa Medhus. She is a physician and the author of the book My Son and the Afterlife, in Norwegian, på Sammen på tvers av døden, which can be bought on my site, Wisdom from North, and the new book that's coming out, My Life After Death. And these books are explaining Erik's afterlife experience, because Erik died in suicide in 2009, and this is all made possible through an energy channeler or a medium. And I actually interviewed Jamie Butler, the medium, last week, so you can expect to see that interview very soon. And this all has resulted in the great blog, The Channelings of Erik, which is now visited by thousands of people around the globe. Elisa, it's nice to meet you. Welcome to Wisdom from North.
Thank you, Janneke. I hope I said that right. You sure did pronounce my last name perfectly. One of the few.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure whether to say Elisa or Elisa. How do you pronounce it? Elisa.
Fine.
Yes, because Erik was half Norwegian, because your husband is Norwegian, right?
Exactly. Rune.
Rune, yeah. So let's hear about the story, because for those who doesn't know this story, let's go all the way back to when your son died, because he had bipolar disease.
He had bipolar disease. He had a little Tourette's, some odd motor and verbal tics. He had learning differences, so he had a tough time in school. One math teacher called him stupid to his face. That wasn't very nice. So he really struggled a lot, and we tried everything that we could to help him. We surrounded him with love. We gave him all sorts of opportunities. We sent him to a therapist and a psychiatrist every week. I mean, ours is such a loving family. Not one phone call hangs up or ends without us saying, I love you. And nobody leaves the house without saying, I love you. So he had that, but still, his illnesses were just too much for him. So he shot himself. Now, for me, this was really difficult because I'm a physician. So, I've been trained in science. My education is almost all science. And material science, anyway, teaches us that that something is real only if you can perceive it with one of your senses, or if you can measure it with an instrument. And all of a sudden, Erik was gone. I didn't see him, hear him, smell him, touch him, nothing. And then what made matters worse is I was raised by two atheists, militant atheists, oops, so sorry.
That's fine.
I was raised by two militant atheists, and I just didn't have a belief system about life after death at all. So
you were a skeptic, right? Like you didn't believe in it?
Well, I wasn't an atheist. I just didn't really think about it very much, to tell you the truth. I'm raising 5 kids, a very busy practice. I didn't have really much time to contemplate much of anything. And most of it was running after Erik, trying to keep him out of trouble, probably. But I was left in a vacuum, and I was just devastated. It was like an atom bomb went off in our family. It was just awful. And anyway,
so how did this start? Like what I read from the book, Erik actually got in contact with all the family members, but not you for a while.
The thing that really started me on my journey from skepticism to belief was when my father called me 3 days after Erik died. And remember, this is an atheist. I mean, he looks down on people who believe in an afterlife. And he sounded panicky. He said on the phone, Elisa, I was sitting here in my chair reading my newspaper, and all of a sudden Erik appears before me. And then he turns into his little boy self and crawls up into my lap. I don't know what to believe. I'm so startled. So that's like, what? Because he would never say that to make me feel better or anything. He's just that militant. So that's when I started reading everything I could, or at least I could understand, on quantum physics, surrounding the survival of consciousness after death, near-death experiences, just everything I could. But eventually, I just sort of ran out of stuff that I could understand, to tell you the truth. And my bookshelves, I don't think they could take anymore. So that's when I started to contemplate the idea of getting in touch with a medium to try to contact Erik. Now, before, I would imagine a medium to be a gypsy hunched over a crystal ball. I didn't take too much stock in mediumship, sorry to say. And so it was a real big leap for me, but I heard on the forums of different grievers sites on the internet that a lot of parents did try it at desperation, so I wanted to also. Now, you're right. At the same time, Erik was making his presence known all through the family except for me. He was doing just some crazy stuff that he still does today. And now he has explained to me why I was the last one to really get any of his visits or perceive him at all. And you want to talk about the science behind it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, everything is energy. I mean, everything, even this book, it's like matter, it's frozen light, Einstein would call it. Even our thoughts, emotions, everything's energy. And every form of energy vibrates on this long electromagnetic spectrum. That's where we have X-rays and ultraviolet rays and cosmic rays and all. And we occupy a tiny little sliver in that range called the visible spectrum. That's where our world is. That's where we see things. That's where we perceive matter. And unfortunately, we also, so we can't see anything above the visible range or below it. And spirits vibrate at a frequency higher than the visible range. And unfortunately, when you grieve, when you're really profoundly depressed, and I was, then your vibrational frequency of your own energy plummets down to the lower end of the visible range. I'm surprised it didn't disappear altogether. But and so it's really hard for a spirit to lower their own vibrational frequency to get down to that lower level. Think about it. That's why we say things like, I feel so down, I'm depressed. That's actually our energetic frequency going down. And we feel dense, we feel heavier. And when we feel happy, oh, we're over the moon, high as a kite, etc. So, and you feel lighter. So that's the scientific explanation behind it. But eventually, I got my visits, plenty of them too.
Yeah. And then you started to go to these mediums. And I mean, I spoke to Jamie, but she wasn't the first one you visited, after what I understand.
Yes, I went to another one, Kim O'Neill, very good. But, you know, all of this you have to obviously pay for. And so one of the blog members, and we can talk about the blog later if you want, recommended Jamie. And she was relatively new. She did not charge very much. And it's, for me, this is labor of love. So everything involving the blog comes out of my pocket. I don't accept donations, no monies at all. So, you know, it gets to be expensive. So, frankly, I was trying to cut expenses. She was amazing, though. She didn't even know I had a son. She, you know, certainly didn't know I had a son that killed himself, but that's the first thing that came out of her mouth is, your son is here. And he says he killed himself and described that he was sitting at his desk, what kind of gun he used, the exact description of the clothing he was wearing. It was just so detailed. And his personality. Erik is just a mischievous, irreverent, direct kid that had a sailor mouth. He said some bad words. He didn't learn it from me, though, I promise.
So, were you sure that it was him right away? Like, were you convinced there and then? Or did it take time before you actually, you know, had to be convinced? Because, I mean, even I'm doing all of these interviews and I get all these signs that this is a real deal. And I read this book, you know, and I cry and I made this blog about it. But still, there's this side of me who is saying, well, I'm not experiencing myself.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, that's funny that you should bring this up. A very good question. It took me 4 years before I truly believed. I mean, here are some of the things that had happened over that 4-year period. Beside that wonderful uncannily accurate reading by Jamie. I would have an airsoft BB, a little plastic BB pellet, appear at the ceiling in front of me and drop to the floor. We had appliances turn on that were not plugged in at all. He just amazing stuff. We would watch him lock the deadbolt. It would turn. In fact, he's locked radio producers out of their studio between segments. So be careful. And then one time, he actually called me on the phone.
What?
Yeah. It was during campaign season, so we were getting all these very irritating calls soliciting campaign funds. And it was ringing, and I was so trying hard to concentrate because, with my ADD, it takes a big effort for me to concentrate on my computer. And then finally it picked up, and there was a voice that said, "Mom, it's me, Erik, it's me." And it was his voice.
Is that
so
true?
I dashed over there, and I picked it up, but it was too late. But here's some of the interesting things about that. It was a 12-digit number, and I called it. It was not really a functioning number. Plus, the answering machine did not leave the message. It was a message count 0, and it would have if it had been a human person. Now, he also, since writing the book and doing radio interviews, has left messages, sounds on the recordings that we don't hear live. For example, one host, and this is all in my process to trying to believe, and even after that, I'd still like, I believe it, and then time would pass and doubts would creep in after each of these experiences. But a host called me and said, "Elisa, I heard Erik shouting out something, and certainly wasn't heard live." So I listened, and he shouts out, "Minions!" And then Jamie immediately repeats, he's calling them minions. So it's on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Then there was one time that I actually saw him. I went to bed. I laid down, and I barely got my head on the pillow when there I saw Erik hopping from one foot of the bed to the next, back and forth and back and forth. And my deceased sister Denise was sitting on the left-hand side just looking at him and grinning and thinking he was being crazy. So I just couldn't believe it. I followed him with my eyes. It was also surreal, back and forth. And then all of a sudden, he looked at me and looked completely startled and said, "Mom, you can see me." And he jumps into my arms and we hug.
Wow.
Believe it or not, even that, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I was just going crazy or something. But then on one of the recorded sessions, we record all the sessions, a lady, maybe 4 years after the session was made, brought to my attention, one of the blog members, that she had heard voices other than Jamie and my voice. And so I listened to where she told me to listen, and sure enough, and one of them was Erik's. I mean, I know the sound of my own kid's voice. I mean, any mother would. So I was very intrigued. I had a sound engineer analyze it. And he was absolutely flabbergasted. He said, "These are not human voices. They don't leave a voice print, for one thing." So we have that proof, too, or hard piece of evidence. And then and that's when I jumped from 94% believing to 100%. That was it. That did it for me. And I will never go back. I believe hook, line, and sinker, as we say here in Texas.
So when you saw him, how did he appear? Did you see him physically? Could you see through him, or?
I could see through him. It was very clear, though. It was barely see-through.
And when you hugged him? Yeah, you felt it?
It felt so solid. It felt like I was hugging him.
Wow.
It was just absolutely just the loveliest moment. It was so lovely.
So I imagine a lot of people who have lost their beloveds are now thinking, why don't they come to me? Why do you think Erik is so accessible? Like he shows up everywhere.
Well, he's nosy, I guess. I don't know. Well, the blog provides him with a platform, so you have this perfect trifecta of me, who's pretty much the lowly secretary. I just transcribe the sessions and ask the questions. And then Jamie, his spirit translator, and him. Any spirit can do what Erik's doing. If that's their life's work there. We just have the perfect platform for him. And it seems like, well, now it's become this global phenomena. Erik, if you're on the YouTube channel as a subscriber or a blog member, he will come and prank you or visit you. The things that he does are just beyond dispute. So now we even have this button on the blog, share your story, so that people can share their Erik encounters, their pranks. And he does it to just all over the world. It's become quite the phenomenon.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the book gives so many answers. I really loved reading it because it's so specific about the afterlife. And, although I had this skeptical mind, I was like, well, this totally makes sense. Everything he's saying, how what he is thinking about appears, and that he can build a house, but if he don't need it anymore, it will vanish in a way, but then it's there when he thinks about it again. And how you can do whatever you want to do, but it seems like they will only do what is beneficial, because why would they be angry? Why would they hurt other people? It's not beneficial, so they don't do it. And it just makes so sense. I'm like, I wish it was like that here.
I know, but we're here for a reason, and he talks about that. But yeah, thought creates reality. That's a principle in physics, that when something is observed by consciousness, it will change a wave, like a photon, a wave of light into a particle. And so they've done these experiments using slit lamps. It's very detailed. So they've proven that something exists once it's observed.
So have you talked to scientists about this? Because I just watched this scientist convention from 2013 on TED, I think, and I didn't hear one word about consciousness. So have you talked to them, and what is their reaction?
I've mostly read, but I really love Dr. Thomas Campbell. He wrote a trilogy called My Big Toe, TOE, Theory of Everything, which is a theory in physics. And he says so many people don't believe because, well, just envision yourself as an intestinal bacteria. For all we know, the bread that comes down to us is manna from heaven. We don't know that seeds have to be sown, that the crops grown and rotated, and the grain taken to the miller and baked into bread. We don't know anything about the global economics of wheat and so on, but yet it still exists. All of this that we cannot see and cannot even easily imagine does exist.
So how have the reactions been? Because I have to say, I noticed, because I've been following your YouTube channel for a long time, and there you talk to Jamie, and she's channeling Erik, and you bring up so many different subjects. It's really awesome. But there were times that you didn't allow comments, and then all of a sudden you did.
Well, that's because there are these people that we label, they're called trolls. They're actually called trolls that actually look for sites to berate. And right after Erik died, I was just still so broken. I just couldn't take the comments. Some of them are just so horrible. I've opened up the channel to comments now, but back again with most of the comments are wonderful and, oh, you've changed my life, etc. But there are some that are just horrible. These are closed-minded skeptics, and it reminds me of the skeptics that were around when we were trying to decide if the earth was flat or round. Those people, yes, the earth is flat. And somebody comes along and says, well, I don't know, it could be round. And eventually now we know that it is. Arthur Schopenhauer is a very famous guy who said that truth goes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed, and I get a lot of that. Next, it's scorned, and eventually it's accepted as self-evident. And that's what we had to go through to get to the earth is round, and that's what I'm going to have to go through, and we're all going to have to go through to get to that place where, spirit, the consciousness does survive death. Yeah,
I get some comments about that too, about the devil and everything, but I've actually thought about how to handle it, and I don't want to put energy into it because I know what I put energy into will grow. So, I mean, they are entitled to say what they mean as long as it has respect. You know, if it's disrespectful, I might take it away because I think you all always should. You can come with your opinions as long as it is respectful. But I'm curious, like when Jamie is channeling Erik, I'm thinking that it's always a filter there because she's still a person. Like, do you think everything is word for word true? Or do you sometimes think,
She's as close as they come. And the repetition, you know, it's so reproducible. What he says through her one time will be the exact thing he'll say through her 2 years later. And she's just great. But you're right. No one's perfect. No human is perfect. Erik is really good with mediums, particularly Jamie, because he helps her keep her filters down. In fact, I remember one session, he kept shouting out, "Jamie, stop weeding me! Don't weed me!" So he keeps her on the straight and narrow.
So why does Erik keep his sailor language? Because
great question.
Yeah, because I imagine, you know, that since he seems very evolved now with his wisdom, that he would speak in this eloquent way, or just lose kind of part of his personality.
Yeah, no, he does it on purpose. First of all, he wants to be recognizable to us, of course, but he wants to be approachable. He's not going to be these entities that start out with "Welcome, my dear one." That's he wants to have that human flavor that people can connect with. And he says this about cursing. He says words are just a string of letters. They get their intent their power by the intent behind them. And his intent is just so benevolent and pure. So if you say a nasty word with anger, that's a different kind of power. The way he says it, just all in fun.
So has he explained to you what the reasons are for being here? Like, what are we doing here as humans?
Oh, that's awesome. You're full of a lot of good questions.
I'm curious.
We are here for the human experience, and that is to experience through duality. Now, in spirit, we can understand a concept of something, like the concept of love. We understand the concept of heat. But you have to experience the opposite in order to really understand it. Like, to really understand what heat is, you, of course, have to experience cold also. So we come down here and we create roles with one another that will provide us with that contrast. Say you want to learn more about the meaning of forgiveness, then you might hook up with another spirit and say, "Hey, look, come to me in this lifetime and you betray me, and that way I can learn about forgiveness." So it's about creating that contrast that will help us understand all facets of love. Erik says that we are here to remember that we are love. But he's also said that we are here to remember how to love. So both of those, it's all about love. Now, one analogy I really like of his, and I can't remember if it's in the book or not, is the Brownie Analogy. He says that, spirits, you can look at a recipe for a nice chocolate brownie and see a picture, you kind of get the idea. But no, you have to get in the kitchen, mix up the ingredients, get batter all over your clothes, put them in the pan, put them in the oven. Maybe you're going to burn your fingers. You cook them, you cool them off, you frost them, and you take a bite. And that's when you really know what a brownie is.
Now, do you think that there's a fate? Like, was he supposed to take his life, do you think? Or was it a choice?
It's free. There's free will in both his dimension and ours. Of course, there's no external force directing our fates. There's no such thing as karma. That's an external force. He had designed an exit point at a very young age. His mission was to come here and to suffer, and in doing so, learn about relationships and learn how to develop the skills he would need to have to go back and become a spirit guide, which he is now. So, that entails listening skills, compassion, all that. And he did. He did gain those tools. He was an amazing listener. I remember this would happen a lot. He would go to Starbucks for coffee, in our neighborhood. And he did it because I think he was lonely, He didn't have very many true friends. And he probably wanted to bum cigarettes. He liked to smoke too. So they would always smoke outside. And for some reason, people would just gravitate toward him. Strangers would come over, sit with him and start talking, and he would listen. And eventually they'd share their whole sad stories, and maybe they'd even burst into tears. And Erik would grab him, hug him, and say, "Look, dude, I'm taking you home. My mom's going to make you a home-cooked meal." Then he'd call me, "Mom, can you cook your pot roast?" It's like, oh gosh, I guess I got to get the frozen meals back in the freezer. So he was a really good listener, and he developed that through his suffering. He understood what it meant to feel pain.
But the way he exited was his choice in a way, but he was supposed to die young.
Yeah, he said that, I asked him that, I said, why couldn't you have just waited until you're 80 or 90 and then gone back and do the work that you're doing now? And he said he just doesn't think he could have tolerated it that much longer. I mean, he was so miserable.
Let's talk a little bit about suicide, because this is something I was afraid of when I was young, thinking about if one committed suicide, would you go to hell? Because I read somewhere that you would, like that's the worst thing you can do. And then I understood, no, it's not that way. I heard more and more stories like yours. But still, Erik is saying that suicide is not the solution.
No, absolutely not. Now, back to hell, I'll say something about hell first. There is no hell. All the source energy, you can call it God, you can call it mass consciousness, you can call it light, you can call it love, is all there is. And to have a hell would imply something separate from that. It's impossible. So there is no hell. On suicide, he says that when it's not your time, when you don't have it as a predestined exit point for a purpose, and that's not very common, then you regret it, because you take all your problems with you. In fact, you create more problems for yourself, because now you've got all this horrible grief in your wake that's just, and you feel every heartache, you see every tear, you hear every thought, every moan. Furthermore, you're also all of a sudden going to be aware of missed opportunities, because suppose you were supposed to get a little older, have a daughter that was going to find a cure for diabetes. Now you'll find out that there'll be scores of people who are going to suffer and die because of what you did. So, yeah, it's not the answer.
So when he died, can you take us through a little bit of what he experienced? Because he had this life review, didn't he? How does that work?
Well, first, when he died, he heard the ricochet of the bullet, and then everything went black, and he all of a sudden sees his body, and he said the body just seemed like a shell. It didn't seem like his own. Even his fingers seemed too long, he said. And he didn't really have any emotional connection to the body either. He sort of panicked, oh my gosh, what have I done? Tried to get back in, but knew it was pretty hopeless. And he grabbed a gun, and he found out that his hand just slipped right through. He thought that was odd. He tried to move his face, but his hand again slipped right through. Eventually, after that, he said his goodbyes, and I think this is mostly in the second book. He attended his funeral, and then he crossed over. And his crossing over.
What does that mean, to cross over? Because it sounds like he already crossed over, to the other side. So, is there another level he's crossing over to?
Yeah, from the earthly dimension And there are infinite numbers of dimensions. And they're all swirled into each other, including his, with ours, into the dimension he's in. That's what you cross over to. And it's interesting because I think Nassim Haramein, a quantum physicist, equated death to crossing into a white hole, from a black hole to a white hole. I can't remember everything about it, but all of our atoms, etc., are little black holes or whatever. But there's science behind it, is all I can tell you. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't go through any white tunnel. He just appeared in this white room, and he met my sister Denise and my mother-in-law. And then there were these spirits around this table telling him he was about to attend his life review. And he wasn't given a choice. Would you like to do this or not? Would you like to buy a ticket? Have some popcorn? No. And he said it was really unusual because it felt like, I don't know if you have these panoramic theaters, cycloramas, that you can see 360 instead of just seeing a screen in front of you. Well, but that was what it was like. He could see 360 degrees everything about his life, from right before he was born to his death. And but he could not just see it from his perspective. He saw it through the perspective of everyone he encountered. If he got mad at somebody, he would see that whole scene play out through their eyes, feel their feelings, everything. And there was no judgment. It's not like, oh God, I rewind. I want to do this over again. There was no feeling of that. It was just a valuable experience to learn. Every experience you have that's negative. I'll say that for better. I don't really know how else to replace that, but is valuable. There's value in pain because there's almost always a lesson in it, and the life review is a way to see these lessons play out and to take away the final piece of teaching.
It's so amazing because I've heard this many times. I've read about these life reviews, and they happen so fast, and it's the whole life and all perspectives. And I'm like, how is that possible? I can't even imagine. But I guess it's about time again, that there's no time there.
That's right. And he said it's so detailed. You're even aware of how many times a person will swallow or blink. It's that detailed.
Wow. So what is the most, or the thing that has astounded you most about what he's telling about the afterlife? Because you've had so many YouTube videos now with Jamie and covered so many interesting topics. I love watching them. Like, what is the most, or the thing that has surprised you the most that you didn't know or didn't imagine?
Well, gosh, there are so many. The fact that the sky has a texture to it, the fact that there are these beautiful cities with spires that are actually made of spirits themselves. And the spirits can create the buildings this way, but they can also just go about being the spirits, doing their own thing, because spirits can split, like Erik. He can split infinitely. That's why he can wreak havoc on so many people's lives, hiding sunglasses and keys and moving things.
Wow. Yeah, because how would you define the soul? And does he talk? I think he talks about this. Now, what is the soul and what is the spirit and the higher self?
Well, the soul is just your spirit when it's in a body. That's it. It's just semantics. And he says the soul is made of neutrinos. So those are tiny little particles that were discovered because they were able to pass through lead onto some sort of measuring device. And when you die, those particles turn into a waveform, and those waves are carriers of information. We are information that's self-aware, so that certainly makes sense. So the spirit and the soul are made of neutrinos. I can't remember the other part to your question.
The higher self and how.
Oh, the higher self.
How
Yes.
it's connected then to the source, you know? Because my theory is that you have the source is kind of like this umbrella, or everything is source, but that we are from the light, like not from the sun, like the beams coming out of it, in a way.
Yeah, such good questions. That's another great one. He describes it like a hologram. Let's use God for lack of a better term, even though that has some religious connotations. But just let's say God source. See it as a hologram with your image on it. You are God. Now, you know those little pendants in the, I don't know, 70s or 80s that were holograms and had like a skull on them or something. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Anyway, take that pendant, smash it on the ground, let it break into little shards. And if you were to look at each of those shards under a microscope, you'd see the image of yourself. So we are whole and part of God. Our higher selves, we are God in whole and we are God in part. And that's really hard to wrap our heads around, but that's the way it works. Now, the higher self, again, can split off into many selves, and they're having different incarnations. And that whole thing with time, you don't get reincarnated because there's no time. We're living all our incarnations, past, present, future, right now. So imagine your higher self.
I just got an aha. I was like, of course.
Yeah.
I've always thought in reincarnation was before. And even though I've spoken about everything happens now, all of a sudden I just had this aha, like everything is happening now. I'm doing everything now. Oh my goodness.
And sometimes some of your lives will bleed over into your current life. Say one life you're drowning, whatever, you might develop a phobia for water in this lifetime because of that. But anyway, so imagine a wagon wheel. And your higher self is at the hub. And all the spokes are your different selves living different incarnations. And it'll live an incarnation and then recede back, and another one, just keep have this constant incarnation going on. Now, as that wheel rolls, it'll leave tracks in the mud. Well, that is our human timeline. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's
that's our linear time. That helps to explain the association. He also explains timelessness, like let's say every life you're living is in a book. Well, those books are all stacked in one moment, and you just happen to be cognizant of the book you're reading now that you're focusing your intent on. That's why you're focused on this life. But there's another you somewhere that's reading another book, maybe as a monk in the 1800s in France.
Right. Actually, the video I referred to earlier, they spoke about the hologram. I mean, they're getting there. They're saying that we might not be as real as we think we are. Like, science is saying that, and I've always had this feeling that we're sort of an illusion here, that it's kind of a dream, and now they're saying it. So we're getting there, it seems like.
Science and spirituality are starting to walk hand in hand more and more.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elisa.
Sure.
So when is your new book coming out? I think it's already out online.
It's out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, lots of other places online. It won't be, that's just for pre-order. It won't be truly available until September the 1st. But we're going to have some giveaways where you can actually win the advanced copy before it's a month before it's published. So that'll be fun.
And that's more from Erik's perspective.
Oh, it is just so much detail. It's just, I'm not bragging because I did not write the book. I just transcribed it. This is all Erik. It is just absolutely jaw-dropping, page-turning, heart-wrenching, belly-laughing. It's just absolutely an amazing book. I'm so proud of him.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much, Elisa. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I hope it's the first of many. Thank you for your brilliant questions.
Oh, I'm just curious. I'm very curious. Well, thank you for watching, guys, and I can really recommend checking out Lisa's YouTube channel and also reading this book, which you can buy on my site, and the new one coming out. Much light. Bye bye.
Bye.